Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar Ideas to Improve Your QA Operations and Efficiency. Thanks a lot for joining me here today on this webinar. I really appreciate all of your interest to be a part of this webinar. Today we will be talking about many ideas to improve your QA operations and efficiency. We'll talk about a lot of things which will basically help you to improve your overall QA process. My name is Prashant Hegde and I'm a passionate tester from India. I'm a passionate tester and an agile enthusiast. In the past 5 years, I have played different roles like an agile tester, a scrum master, and a product owner. I love writing. I'm an active blogger and I have authored articles for leading software testing magazines. I'm a frequent speaker in industry conferences and I've also spoken in several international conferences so far. I like to share my experiences through blogging and participating in software testing and agile communities around the world. I'm also creator of an Android app called ISTQB Test Mentor, which is a free Android app for ISTQB aspirants. This app has helped thousands of ISTQB aspirants to clear their examination in the first shot. I currently lead the QA team at an organization called MoEngage, which is based in Bangalore, India. MoEngage is a leading marketing automation platform that enables marketers to engage their customers through different channels like push notifications, emails, SMS, and so on, with the ability to auto-optimize towards higher conversions using machine learning. So you can see some of my social links. Feel free to follow me and also get in touch with me. I'm very active on social media and I would love to connect with you guys and talk about testing and anything about agile and so on. So speaking about today's agenda, here is what you can expect out of the session. By the end of the session, you will learn how to prevent bugs by testing early and testing throughout. You will learn how to devise an intelligent test automation strategy and how to measure the value of test automation. You will learn the significance of exploratory testing and how we can use mind map driven testing to complement exploratory testing. We will also discuss about why quality of the test data matters. And of course, we will talk about several tips, tricks, strategies, and tools that will help you to improve your overall QA operations. So this will be a 1.5 hour session. So I will take all the questions at the end. Feel free to drop your questions in the YouTube chat. So I will take up all the questions once the session is. So let's get started. These days, you might have heard of a new term, right? A buzzword called as shift left, right? Shift left is something that I want to start with for this webinar. Shift left, though, is a buzzword these days, but it has been there for a very long time in software testing. Right? But the shift left term has been popular these days. So basically, shift left is the practice wherein you start testing as early as possible to prevent bugs in the software delivery lifecycle. According to a research done by Capgemini, 64% of all the defects emerge during the requirements phase itself, right? And shift left is more of a mindset, it's more of a cultural shift rather than a process or a concept. So we know shift left based on a concept called as Boehm's curve, right? So this is one of the basic principles of software testing. You know that the later the bug found, the more expensive it is to fix. If you find a bug in the testing phase, right, it's more expensive to fix than found in coding, design, or deployment. Let's say I found a bug in the testing phase, then I will have to do a lot of rework by updating my requirements, right? I will have to update my designs. I will have to do a lot of bug fixing, and of course, I will have to test again. So think about the amount of rework you, right? So that's why we need to shift left and start testing at the earliest stage possible. That's what Bohem's curve preaches us. These days, we speak about automation and DevOps, right? Many people feel that we need only automation in the age of DevOps, but that's not true, right? We need exploratory testing and other forms of testing along with automation testing. So this is a diagram by Dan Ashby wherein he shows how testing fits in each and every phase of DevOps cycle, right? So this is nothing but continuous testing, right? Continuous testing is the process wherein you'll test everything, right? You'll test new requirements, you'll test new code, you'll test every build, you'll test every deployment, and you'll also test on production. So this process of testing throughout is called as continuous testing. There is also a concept called as shift right, which basically talks about testing on production, right? So now I want to talk about continuous testing and shift left and shift right, fit in, right? Continuous testing equals to shift left plus shift right, because continuous testing means you test throughout. I'll talk about a few activities that you need to do to achieve continuous testing, right? Let's start with shifting left. How you can test early and prevent bugs, right? And how you can give early feedback. Agile and DevOps is all about giving early feedback. So some of the activities that you need to do to shift left are static testing, right? Static testing is nothing but reviewing your documents like your PRDs, your your requirement documents, right? Your user stories. So any form of requirements or technical docs, right? Or your test cases. So static testing basically is reviewing of documents so that we can prevent bugs in the later stages. As testers, we need to involve in static testing. We can also involve in design reviews, right? We can also look at the wireframes and we can give feedback on the wireframes. Many times it so happens that designers may miss some flows, right? As testers, we can actually give them feedback before the UI is actually prepared. So to achieve continuous testing, we need support from development side as well, right? So in Agile and DevOps, testing and quality is not just the responsibility of testing team or QA team. Quality is a shared responsibility. Even developers will uh, contribute to quality. Even your uh, SRE or your DevOps will contribute to quality. So the entire team will have to contribute. So the developers part of shifting left comes from test-driven development, wherein they actually write tests even before they write a single line of code. Developers involved in code reviews, unit tests, right? So these are some of the activities that come from developers side. CI and CD is the key enabler of continuous testing and shifting left. CI and CD will let developers get early feedback, right? Whenever they merge the code to the main branch multiple times a day, basically they get a quick feedback because of the automation tests that are in place. So CI and CD becomes an important part shifting lefts and giving early feedback. Testers can also go for service virtualization. If a service or a component is not available for testing, you can basically go for service virtualization and unblock your testing. You can go for in-sprint test automation. In this webinar, we'll also talk about how to achieve in-sprint test automation. So I'll be speaking about it in a couple of minutes. Right? This is about shifting left. So what about shifting right? There are some things which is better done on production environment. So the production environment actually has the scale which your testing or your staging environments do not have. To shift left, you can perform some activities like app monitoring or your application performance monitoring, API monitoring, where you basically see how your services and your APIs perform in real world conditions. This basically comes from developers and from SRE or your DevOps. Of course, as QA, you can also contribute in these regions as well. From QA perspective, you can use feature toggles. Feature toggles is nothing but hiding a feature in production. Right? You can make a feature visible or invisible on a production environment. So you can basically make your new feature invisible for your clients, and you test on that feature so that you're absolutely sure that nothing breaks on production. So you can actually leverage feature toggles to shift right. You can use canary. Canaries is nothing but diverting only some percent of the traffic to the new feature. That way you can test your new feature with a limited traffic, and you will not impact many customers if there is an issue. You can also go for A/B testing. If you have two variants of the same application or the same screen, you can have an A/B test wherein you can see how both of these variants perform by diverting traffics to two different variations, and based on the outcome you can choose which variation to go ahead with. You might have heard of the chaos testing or the chaos monkey, which Netflix uses on production. Netflix basically induces controlled failures on their production environments and test how their services work. So you need to embrace all these activities together to enable continuous testing. Right? Again, as I told you, this involves the entire team effort. You need testers, you need developers and SRE to achieve this continuous testing. So the next thing I want to talk about is devising an intelligent test automation strategy. Test automation is the key enabler of Agile and DevOps. But investing in test automation without a proper plan will lead to failures. So today I want to talk about how you need to form a solid test automation strategy. So it's important for QA and testers to eradicate unrealistic expectations about test automation. Many times, managers and stakeholders do not understand testing and especially test automation. There are lots of myths and misunderstandings about test automation. So if you don't set the expectation right, and if you don't educate your stakeholders, right, they will not be satisfied no matter how well test automation does. And also it's important to have a definition of success for test automation. You need to define what success means to test automation. And also educate your stakeholders on what test automation can achieve. So there are many myths about test automation, like test automation will replace manual testers and it's better than exploratory testing. Right? All these are not true. We testers are trying to kill our jobs from last 15 years, but we are not able to do that. Test automation is not here to replace us, but to complement our tests. Test automation is here to help us. Test automation is here to help us accelerate and get a competitive advantage, right? So that's what we need to understand. And also, many people, especially managers, expect quick ROI from test automation. Test automation is a long-term investment. You need to wait to get some benefits out of test automation. Uh, you might not see benefits overnight. And also, one mistake that many people do is not accounting for maintenance of test automation. Test automation is nothing but writing scripts, and at the end you'll have to maintain the scripts. Especially the sole testers in the team who want to automate will have to also think about maintaining test automation. Many initiatives fail because of not accounting for maintenance. And also, we talk about automating everything, right? Always automated testing is better, and we need to automate everything, but that's not true. We will talk about what you should automate and what you should not automate. Okay. So before we go ahead, I have left some of the links on some of the slides, which you can which you can always refer by coming back to the slides, and you can go to these articles to get more information about the topics I talked about. So now let us talk about what we should automate and what we should not automate. Speaking about what you should automate monotonous and repetitive work. Machines are good. Machines are very good to do monotonous or repetitive work, especially your regression tests. Right? So regression tests, your smoke tests and BBT tests are ideal candidates for test automation. You can also automate your business critical use cases. Some business critical use cases can also lead to loss in revenue or reputation of your organization. You need to plan and automate these business critical use cases. And you should also have automated alerts in case of failures, right? Whenever a test case fails or something wrong happens in production, you need to automate alerting. And if you want to test a test case with many different types of data, maybe from Excel or any other file, right? Such thing can also be automated, which we call as data-driven testing. You can also automate cross-browser testing when you have to test a lot of test cases on several browsers, several operating systems, and several screen sizes. You can also automate non-functional tests like your load testing. You can also automate visual regression testing. So for people who do not know what visual regression testing is, visual regression testing is basically uh, testing your UI for differences. When you do visual regression testing, you basically have uh, a baseline, and you compare your current website with the baseline and see if there are any differences in the UI, like your button has been missed, or if your alignment has gone wrong. Anything that happens in a DOM can be captured using visual regression testing. So to conclude, you should automate everything that can be automated and that adds value. Speaking about what not to automate, you should not automate something that needs human intelligence and intuition. Some things are better done by humans than machines. So such cases should not be automated, right? And you should not automate partially. You should not have human intervention when the automation is going on. So if you are automating, you need to automate it end to end. Especially when automating UI, it's wise not to start too early, and especially when you know there are changes expected. Let's assume that my UI is going to change. We are going to move from Angular to React, right? So if I know that such changes are going to happen very quickly, then I will probably wait till the changes are done, especially when automating UI. And it's not also wise to automate one-time tasks, edge cases, tests with unpredictable results, because they are not worth the ROI. Of course, you cannot automate UX, and most importantly, do not automate for the sake of automation. Do not automate when you do not have a measurable return on investment. So keep these things in your mind when you go ahead and automate. And also educate your team about what to automate and what not to automate. Now I want to talk about a concept called test automation pyramid by Mike Kohn. In our current organization, even we use this as our basis for test automation strategy. Let me tell you how this works. We have three layers in the automation pyramid. The first layer is the unit test, then we have the API test, and finally we have the UI test. The breadth or the width of the pyramid represents how many cases or how many test cases should be present in every layer. So test automation pyramid says that you should have maximum test cases automated at the unit test layer, followed by the API test layer, and finally the UI tests, right? And you can see that as you go on top of the pyramid, the creation cost increases, the maintenance increases, the execution time increases, the fragility increases, and the test coverage also increases. Unit tests are the cheapest to create and they are the fastest to run. UI tests are the most expensive ones to create and slowest to run, right? And also the maintenance increases as you go on top of the ladder. Speaking about UI tests can be really flaky, right? And might not be worth the ROI sometimes, right? You need to keep in account the fragility that is involved when you automate UI tests, right? There is always a misconception in the industry that when we speak about test automation, we speak about UI automation, we speak about Selenium, right? So there are other ways how you can achieve automation as well, right? So definitely we need UI automation, we need UI tests, but at the right proportion. One of the forgotten layers of test automation is API testing and automation. So API testing basically tests the core functionality by bypassing the UI, and they are comparatively easier to create, they are easier to maintain, they are quicker to run as well. So we need to have good amount of API tests automated. And speaking about unit tests, they are they are one of the most important components of test automation, and the contribution comes from the developers for automating unit tests, right? No matter how solid automation you have in all three layers, you need to have crafty exploratory testing. You cannot skip exploratory testing no matter how solid you have automation in all three layers. Right? So today we'll also talk about the importance of exploratory testing in some time. So when you are planning for test automation, keep these principles in mind so that you automate at the right layer and at the right proportion, and also understand uh, how creation cost, maintenance, execution, fragility, and test coverage increases when you go on top of the ladder. Basically, test automation preaches that you need to push your test down the API layer and unit test. Now, I want to talk about in-sprint test automation. In-sprint test automation is a key enabler to shift left and also for continuous testing. This is a new term in the industry. So in-sprint automation is nothing but trying to automate all the tasks or user stories of your current sprint within the same sprint window. It's an ambitious concept which tries to automate the tasks within the same sprint, right? If you have 10 tasks in the sprint, you automate them within the sprint itself. This might seem challenging, and impossible, but it's definitely not. Many times, our testing lags behind the development by a couple of sprints. We automate the features of the previous sprints in our current sprint, right? Many people believe that this is a barrier for the speed of agile or for DevOps. So we need to embrace in-sprint test automation to basically shift left and also to accelerate the time to market. So if you want to transition to in-sprint test automation, the first step should be to automate definition of done. You need to automate the acceptance criteria for all the user stories that you have. For people who do not know what definition of done or acceptance criteria means, I want to tell you how this works, right? For every user story in Agile, you have a definition of done. You can say that a story or a requirement is only done when it meets a particular criteria, right? Which we call as acceptance criteria. Acceptance criteria is written by your product owners in collaboration with QA. So you say if A, B, C are met, it means that the requirements are done. Basically, the story is completed. So to start with in-sprint automation, you basically have to start automating these acceptance criteria at API level. I already talked about how API testing helps you to shift left and is relatively easier to automate. Plus, you need not have to actually wait till your UI is ready, right? You can actually start quite early and give early feedback. So in our organization, we are trying to actually embrace this, and we are adding uh, automated tests for every user story in the sprint. So what happens is when you start doing that, your backlog will reduce, right? You'll have not have too many tests to automate in your backlog. So one way of transitioning towards in-sprint test automation. You might think about UI automation. Can we automate UI within the same sprint? Yes, it can be done, right? Let's assume that you want to test a login screen, right? You have login page planned for release this sprint. Okay, so this is a illustration of a tool called Catalan Studio, which is a test automation tool, right? So you can start writing the script for login functionality, right? Only thing that you need to do is you need to wait for the UI to be complete to fill the object properties. You leave the elements properties empty until the UI is done, but you basically write this entire script for logging in, and you update this when the UI is ready. Right, this way you can actually accelerate and you can have your scripts ready even before the UI is ready. A more proactive approach is to have a contract between your front-end dev and your QA. You can come up with a contract which has all the elements planned for the story and their element locators. So if I know what locators I can use for the login functionality, right, I can go ahead and automate parallelly with development. I need not have to wait until the UI is ready. This will unblock testers and help us to automate early, and it will also help us to shift left, right? These are some of the things that you can do, right? Of course, feel free to experiment, and based on your observations, you can take necessary steps to tweak these approach, or you can come up with your own approach to embrace in sprint test automation. Now that we discussed about test automation strategy and in sprint test automation, I want to talk about measuring the value of your test automation. If a stakeholder asks you, what is the ROI of your test automation? you should be able to answer that question. You should know what value your test automation is adding. Right? So if you cannot measure something, you cannot improve, right? So basically, you need to have a goal for test automation, and you need to measure if you are progressing towards that. Today, I will talk about some simple metrics that you can use to measure the value of your test automation. You can ask three simple questions. You can ask, does your test automation save your time? If yes, how much time? Does your test automation save your efforts? If yes, how much effort? Does your automation reduce risks by finding issues? If yes, then quantify it. Just by answering these three questions, you will be able to find out the ROI of your test automation. We will discuss about three different metrics today. They are time saved metric, equivalent manual test efforts, test case effectiveness, and uh, we are going to see how to basically calculate these these metrics by using simple formulas. Firstly, talking about time saved metric, it has a simple calculation. Time saved equals to time needed for manual execution minus time required for automated execution plus fragility. Let's say a regression test takes 15 man hours to execute manually, and the same test takes 5 hours using automation, and it took 2 hours to actually maintain these tests. Right? You have flakiness factor which has to be added here, right? You need 2 hours to fix the fragile test. It means that the time saved for this test is 8 hours. So you can say that with one test you are saving 8 hours. Similarly, when you sum up all your tests, right, this number will be huge. So this way you can actually calculate how much time you are saving from automation. Equivalent manual test effort, devised by Dorothy Graham in 2000. So this basically tells you how much efforts you are saving. Let's say an automated test take 3 hours to run manually. It means that you are saving 3 hours equivalent manual testing effort. Let's say in a sprint, I have to run this automated test which takes 3 hours thrice. I have to run a test which takes 3 hours to run manually 3 times in a sprint. It means that I'm saving 9 hours of equivalent manual testing effort. You can also convert this to cost quite easily. If you multiply it by the average salary of a tester, right, you'll basically convert this to cost. So this is another metric which will help you to calculate your efforts and cost. You can also calculate test case effectiveness. Test case effectiveness basically talks about how effective your automation tests are. Let's say I have 100 automated tests, and this 100 cases find 5 issues. That means that the test case effectiveness of automation is 5%. So you can use this metric to say how much of risks are you able to reduce using test automation, right? So you can use these three techniques to calculate the ROI of your test automation. Again, there is no universal way of calculating the ROI of test automation, but these three metrics are easier and can be used by anyone to calculate the ROI of test. Now that we have talked about test automation and how to measure the success of test automation, I want to talk about the significance of exploratory testing. I would like to ask the question, how effective are your regression tests? Let it be the so-called manual regression tests or your automated regression tests. How effective are they? So before we talk about how effective your regression tests are, I want to talk about the concept called as scripted testing. Right? Many of you might already know about scripted testing, but I want to quickly explain what scripted testing is. Scripted testing basically is the traditional way of testing, wherein you write test cases in advance. You refer either your requirements from a PRD or from your user stories, no matter from where, right? You basically have a basis for testing, and you write test cases in advance. And once the software is ready to be tested, you run these test cases, or you run these scripts and say if a test passed or failed. This approach is called as scripted testing. So in software testing, you should be able to answer two important questions. One is, does the software you are testing behave as intended under the condition it is supposed to handle? And are there any other risks? By scripted testing, you can answer the first question, whether your software behaves as intended under normal circumstances, right? Whether your test cases are are passing the requirements, right? You are able to say if the requirements are met or not using the scripted test. But you cannot answer the second question, are there any other risks? That's where in exploratory testing, right? So there is a book called as Explore It by Elizabeth Hendrickson, and she gives a very nice analogy about tests and nets. Elizabeth Hendrickson compares your scripted tests with nets. So if your scripted tests have good coverage and they're effective, it means that your nets have fine views. If your tests are not effective and they have poor coverage, it means that your nets have loose views. Of course, we know that finer views can catch more bugs. And talking about your automated tests also fall under the category of scripted tests. You might have also uh, uh, heard about testing versus checking by Michael Bolt, wherein he says automation is not testing, but rather it's checking. So even automation comes under the bucket of scripted testing. So now talking about the question, coming back to the question, how effective are your regression tests, whether it is automated or the so-called manual, right? So if you say I have really good coverage and I have fine views, right? Even with the finest views in a net, you cannot catch everything. Just to quote Martin Flower, he says that a solid suite of automated tests act as a fine net that can catch bugs before we go to production. But such net can't tell if the net covers all the cases. So even if your automation tests are really effective, right, you will not be able to catch all the bugs. Let's compare your product or your software with the sea or an ocean. And your script can cover only a small area, right? You cannot test everything. Exhaustion testing is impossible, right? So this is where exploratory testing comes in. Exploratory testing focuses on the areas that your net cannot cover. Exploratory testing is all about scouting to those areas where the net does not cover. Now let's talk in detail about what exploratory testing is and how we can perform exploratory testing. As I told you, unlike the traditional approach of scripted testing, we do not define test cases in advance for exploratory testing. And many people confuse exploratory testing with ad hoc testing. Exploratory testing is not ad hoc testing, right? Ad hoc testing is compared to monkey testing, and monkey testing does not have any structure, it's random. But in exploratory testing, you have structure and you need structure thought process, and you need experience, intuition, right? You need sapience of the tester here when performing exploratory testing. To tell you what exploratory testing is simultaneously designing the test and executing the test when learning about the software. So you are doing the exploration, you are doing the learning. Simultaneously, you are also designing tests and executing them. You'll also use your experience, intuition, your testing technique, right? And you'll also use the feedback from your previous tests to guide your testing. So this is what exploratory testing is. Many studies and researchers have shown that exploratory testing can be much more effective than scripted testing and also are quicker to find bugs. Right? Many people have a misconception that we use scripted testing when there is no requirements. This is not true, right? We can use exploratory testing no matter if there is requirements documented or not. So does this mean that we do not need scripted testing? No, we need scripted testing. So tested means that we have checked plus explored. Checked is nothing but scripted tests. Explored means exploratory testing. So your testing is only complete when you do both scripted and exploratory testing. So exploratory testing and scripted testing should complement one another, right? And talking about how to document the findings of exploratory tests, you can use either session notes or mind maps. So many times you might have subconsciously done exploratory testing when you're doing scripted testing, right? Sometimes you might have deviated from your test case when you find a symptom of, right? So when you're executing a test case, you might have seen that there is some issue in some other part of the software, and you basically deviate to that portion based on some hint that you get about the bug. So that's where you are performing exploratory testing. So sometimes when you're exploring, you might get lost. So you need to have something to control your exploration. You need something to keep you on course. So that's where we use something called as charters. So here is a template based on the book by Elizabeth Hendrickson. So here we use the template explore target with resources to discover information. To give you an example, let's assume that I am testing editing profiles. So I can use a template called as explore editing profiles with login methods to discover surprises. Whenever we are doing exploratory testing, it's basically a time box session, right? It's a focus session which you can do for 1 hour or 1.5 hours based on your convenience or your experience. And when you're exploring, you need something like charters to guide you, right? And these charters are uh, not over specifying, nor are they like test cases. These are uh, something that will help you to keep your explorations on track and help you get focused, right? They will guide you to one particular direction and focus on that direction. So when you are using charters, you take session notes along with charters to record your observations, and you use these session notes when you are debriefing to your stakeholders. Right? That's how you can use charters and session notes for doing exploratory testing. But today I want to talk in depth about mind mapping and how mind mapping can be used in exploratory testing. So that will be our next topic, mind map driven testing. So for the people who are hearing about mind maps for the very first time, I just want to give you a quick overview of what mind maps are. Mind maps can be called as visual thinking tools. A mind map reflects externally what goes inside your mind. Right? If I put all my thoughts on a sheet of paper, it looks like a mind map. A mind map is a diagram that represents complex information in a simplified visual form. So when you are drawing a mind map, right? You start at the center of the page and you represent your central idea at the center of the page. Mind mapping is basically a technique that will help you to brainstorm or learn something new, right? You can use mind maps for n number of requirements, but most importantly, we use mind maps for brainstorming, for learning, for teaching, and so on. So usually mind maps are drawn around a single topic, and we represent that topic at the center of the screen, or the center of the page. Of course, you can use a sheet of paper to draw mind maps, or there are number of tools available online that you can download to start creating mind maps. So you start at the center of the page and you start drawing branches from your central idea. So you use branches to connect your main idea to your subordinate ideas, right? So you basically use keywords to represent your ideas, and you use a lot of images and colors throughout the mind map. And the branches need to be curved in nature. So mind maps are proved to be a cognitive activity, and and researchers have shown that mind maps as a visual tool is much more effective than traditional ways of learning, and can help you unleash creativity and imagination. So every aspect of mind map has a scientific reasoning behind it, right? I can talk about mind maps for a lot of time, but this can be a scope for another webinar. But I just wanted to give you an overview of how you can design mind maps, and you need to know what mind maps are before you use it in testing. So you can feel free to read more about mind maps, and do some reading about mind maps. Coming back to the context of software testing, let's see how we can use mind maps in software testing, especially during exploratory testing. Let's assume that I am testing a simple notepad, right? A simple text editor. Your central idea will be the application name and your uh, application icon. And you start drawing branches from your central idea where you add all the features that you want to test in this exploratory session, right? So as I told you, exploratory session happens in a time boxed event. Basically, you have a set time in which you focus on certain areas of your application, right? So add your focus areas on the branches of your mind map. The next step is to come up with test ideas for the features or the areas that you have identified. So I start exploring the Notepad application, right? Since I'm doing exploratory testing, I actually see that save can be a functionality that can be accessed from file menu. I can use the hotkeys Control plus S. I can also save from the confirmation pop-up, right? This is basically my exploration part, and I start adding my test ideas on the branches. If you look at my approach here, I'm not spending any time on test documentation, and I'm not using extensive steps to represent my test cases. Right? I'm not using detailed steps like click on file menu, click on save button. The expected result is the file is saved. No, I am not using detailed steps to execute my test cases or to represent my test cases. Right? As testers, we are smart enough, and we do not need detailed steps to execute our own test cases. And and if you look at the approach, my entire focus is on test idea generation rather than on test documentation. Since we are doing exploratory testing, right, we simultaneously do test execution as well as test idea generation. So as and when you execute your test, update your mind map. I have represented the test that passed with the green tick mark and the test that failed with the red cross. This helps me to identify which tests passed and which tests. Once you come up with ideas for all your features, you have a bird's eye view of your test coverage. You can clearly see which features have test ideas, which features do not have test ideas. Right? Feature like open does not have any test idea. You can see which test cases are executed, which test cases are not executed. Right? You can see which test passed, which test failed. Right? You can see that features like save as, print, and view have limited test cases. Basically, I have the holistic view of the testing that has been performed. Right? It gives me, it also helps me to analyze the coverage and the progress of software testing. Once you once you are completed the session, right? Once you complete your time box session, one thing that you love about mind maps is you did not have to spend any additional time to come up with a test report. The final version of your mind map itself acts as a test report. You can share the same thing with your stakeholders. It kind of acts as a dashboard for them, wherein they can view the entire testing activity, the summary of entire testing in one. So this is how you use mind maps along with exploratory testing. I'll give you some more examples. Some time back, I was testing an application called Inblocks, which is basically an email client for iPhone. And there was a new feature introduced wherein user could add up to 3 different accounts. And I started exploratory testing on this feature. I have used a similar approach like that of the notepad. One thing I have done differently is I have added bugs directly to the Agile is all about giving early feedback, right? I did not want to spend too much time in writing detailed test cases and and writing detailed bug reports. I just wanted to give a early feedback by performing a quick exploratory testing to my developers, right? I shared the same mind map with my developers, and they were able to fix the bugs early in the development lifecycle, making us truly agile. So here is one more example of one of the regression testing sessions that I and my team did. So basically, you can also use mind maps to do collaborative testing. You and your entire team can contribute and execute tests on the same mind map. Collaborative mind mapping can be very effective, and I suggest you guys also to implement collaborative mind mapping. So speaking about the tools, I have listed some tools that you can use to mind map. Right? Feel free to explore all these tools. If you are starting for the very first time and if you haven't used mind maps, I recommend that you start with Xmind. Xmind is a great tool and has a really good UI. It's really intuitive. Here is a illustration of how easily you can create mind maps using Xmind. Okay, so I will let you guys to explore the part of mind maps. Right? I will go to the next topic. So the next question I want to ask you is, many times as testers we are not able to find the issues that our customers encounter. Many times the same functionality that worked in our and our test environments do not work in production environments, right? Sometimes the same functionality might not work for one user and might work for another user. Why so? Right? You might have encountered the similar situation. Many times it's because of the test data, right? I have seen many amateur testers using, using incorrect, or I can say non-pragmatic test data. They are using the test data that does not make sense. Test data management is is an important criteria of your entire testing process. and you cannot ignore the test data, right? So if you look at the example here, you can see how a tester might use it in the staging environment versus how the client might use the application, right? So as customer advocates and customer representatives, we testers should understand how our customers behave, right? We should understand how our customers are behaving or interacting with our software. We also should understand the kind of data they are going to use. Only then our testing would be effective. So how can you actually solve this problem of test data? So there are two ways that I'm going to discuss today. So the first approach is using your production data for testing. In software testing, production data is the king, and it's a great source of data diversity, and it reflects real usage. But the major challenge using the production test data is that there are many security and privacy concerns about using test data from production. You might have heard of GDPR and other compliances that are in favor of protecting customer data, right? So you need to mask or anomalize your testing data, right? You need to mask the production data so that user security is not compromised or user privacy is not compromised, right? So you can actually use a enterprise level test data management tool to achieve this, or you can build in-house to, to download and put your production data in your staging environment, of course, after anomalization, right? You can use these two techniques to basically pull data from production. There is another challenge, that is you cannot actually dump all your production data in your staging environment, right? You need to subset your production data. So there are of course storage and infrastructure limitations on your testing or on your staging environments, right? So you need to subset your data. That is, you need to pick only a small portion of your entire production data and put it in your staging environments. Again, this can be done by an enterprise level test data management tool, but it can be really expensive to do that. So it's recommended to build an in-house tool or automated scripts. Another challenge with production data is, right, when you subset and mask, it's difficult to preserve the characteristics of production data, especially your data complexity and your referential integrity. And sometimes production data might focus more on the happy path and not on edge cases. And when testing new functionality, you might not have the necessary data to actually start testing or use production data. These are some of the challenges associated with production data, though it's a great source of diversity, and that's what customers use. The second approach is to use something called synthetic data. Synthetic data is programmatically generated data, and it does not contain any sensitive information. So by using synthetic data, you need not have to worry about the security and privacy concerns or any laws, right? You can actually generate test data and start using. Again, there are some challenges with respect to synthetic data as well. So when you use synthetic data, it might not be realistic enough to cover edge cases, right? It might not be as rich as your production environment, and it might not replicate your production data's complexity and referential integrity. So in order to generate synthetic data, you can use scripts and add the data directly to your database. You can get some interfaces, front-end interfaces, or some graphical user interfaces to actually add some data into the production environments or your testing environments. You can use the CRUD APIs, right? We have some APIs which we can use to create users or to create records. We can use that to create synthetic test data. And there are a lot of online tools that are available that will help you to create synthetic data. So I have listed some tools which will help you to generate test data. So when I speak about test data, it's I'm talking about both automation, exploratory, right? You need test data for both automation as well as exploratory testing. So I also mentioned some libraries which are open source. You can use that. So coming to the conclusion of test data, so you need to strike the right balance between production data and synthetic data instead of worrying about which one to use, right? You need to strike a right balance and use production data wherever necessary and use synthetic data wherever necessary, right? So it's important to come up with proper strategy for test data to actually find the bugs that you're. It's not just enough if you have the customer like data. It's also important to understand the actions that your customers do, right? So, so one step that you can do is you can shortlist some customers who frequently have issues and basically monitor their issues, right? You can understand their behavior and you can actually find out where the issues are coming from. So you need to shortlist the customers who face frequent issues and use real user monitorings whenever there is a issue. You can use tools like LogRocket to see how your customers are interacting with your application and where the issues are coming, right? And you can of course use the data of those customers who find frequent issues to be more effective in your testing. So to decrease customer bugs, you also need to create a visual dashboard, right? You need to have a dashboard wherein you can always go back and see how many issues were created, how many are open, how many are resolved, right? Which team got how many bugs were leaked. So you need to have this to get some insights on the trends on the customer reported bugs, right? So in order to understand your customer behavior and customer data, you need to start analyzing the bugs that come in, and you need to have a dashboard which actually shows you the number, right? It tells you how many bugs are coming in and for what team and like what kind of bugs are coming in, right? So in our organization we have used a Jira dashboard to actually retrospect on the issues that are coming and also to identify the root causes and understand how the issues are coming. We also use this dashboard in our weekly meetings to discuss about the customer bugs and how we can do it, right? We basically uh, use this dashboard to analyze some of the patterns in development and testing. So you need to create visual dashboards like this to get some actionable insights. Okay, the next topic I want to talk about is about conducting bug bashes. Some of you might have heard of bug bashes already, right? So bug bashes are very effective to find a lot of bugs in a short interval of time. A bug bash is a company-wide or a team-wide event that happens with the collaboration of the entire team, right? When I say entire team, it includes developers, testers, it includes even your stakeholders, your product managers, right? So you have the entire team or the entire company involved in this event. This is basically a time boxed event, and the objective of this event is to find a lot of issues. And when we are doing bug bashes, we focus on a particular area, and the focus is pretty much narrow, right? We focus on a particular area, and we try to find out a lot of bugs. This is especially useful when you don't have a big QA team, and you can do this for a bug cluster, right? We know that 80% of the bugs come from 20% of the features. So you can target such areas and perform bug bashes on them. You can also have bug bashes right before your major product releases, so that you get you basically have a lot of bugs found out before the releases, and also helps you to ease testing. The benefits of conducting bug bashes, of course, bug discovery, and it also helps you to improve your cross-team relationships and helps you in team building. So speaking about why developers should be involved in bug bashes is because the understanding of the product might not be the same. Usually QAs understand the product better, and many times I've seen that backend developers, do not understand how to use the application from the front end or from your UI, right? So when you involve the entire team, everyone gets a chance to understand the product, right? So when you are performing bug bashes, you need to mandatorily include your developers. It also helps them to get a sense of, uh, you know, uh, get a sense of quality, right? This also helps them to come up with quality mindset. So talking about the rules that are involved in the bug bash, you need some roles to be planned in the bug bash to make it a success. Firstly, you need teams, right? You need participants for the bug bash. So you create teams. So when you create teams, it's basically a mixed team containing people from different principles. Like you have product managers, developers, QA, right? UI, UX. You have people from different principles, and the more diversity in your team, right, there will be more innovation. So the more diverse your team is, you'll get different perspectives from people from different areas. So try to have a mixed team when you are performing bug bashes. And of course the teams can perform either exploratory testing or scripted testing, it does not matter. Then you need a role called as stager. Stager basically sets up the environment for bug bashes and ensures that all the participants get required devices, have the proper configurations, right? Basically ensuring that the logistics part and the infra is stable when the bug bash is happening. The most important role of the bug bash is that of a moderator. A moderator basically is the facilitator who ensures that the bug bash is on track. He basically talks to the participants and helps them to resolve their issues or any questions or any queries. So that's what a moderator does. Then finally, you have a scribe. A scribe basically notes down all the observations, improvements made by the participants, and also he manages and triages all the bugs that are raised during the bug bash session. Right? It's important to actually triage the bugs when the bug bash is happening, so that post bug bash you can have a quick debrief, right? So scribe does that job. You can have multiple moderators and scribes as well, and these roles do not take part in the bug bash, and one person can fill in multiple roles as well, right? One person can be both moderator as well as a stager, and one person can be either a scribe and a stager, right? So you can mix up roles, and one person can carry multiple roles. It all depends on how big your organizing committee is, right? Finally, talking about how to organize a bug bash, invite everyone in advance, maybe a couple of weeks earlier. Create teams from from people from different principles. Have a diverse team so that you get a different perspective from everyone. Book a huge room where you can gather all the people, and the room should have a projector and a TV. Usually bug batches happen for 1.5 hours, and the first 15 minutes you talk about how the bug batches work, you brief about the process, and you also talk about the product that we're going to test, right? You need to talk about what function or what feature we are gonna test, and you can also give them some ideas about the areas where they can concentrate and some of the testing scenarios as well. But once you do the introduction and briefing session for 15 minutes, you need to provide 1 hour uninterrupted time for the participants to perform bug bash. basically to find issues. The last 15 minutes is used for debriefing and wrapping up. When you begin the session, use the screen to display the scope of testing, right? You have a monitor in the room, so you use it basically to show some important information. When you start introducing about the bug bash, you show the scope of testing on your screen. You talk about how to report bugs, right? You show some important links wherein users can actually log the bugs, right? You also can display known issues, right? So basically use your screen to show information. And during the session, during the 1 hour uninterrupted session, you can show the reported issues on the screen so that there are no duplicate issues reported, and also show the countdown of how much time is left to complete. So for the bug bash to be successful, you need to attract more and more people to participate in the bug bash. So of course you will have some free snacks, pizzas and drinks so that you can attract more people. And if you want to do it remotely, right, we are also planning to have a remote bug bash very soon in our organization. You need to have some rewards so that the team is motivated, right? We usually have 3 rewards in our organization. We reward the critical bug, the best team, and the best bug hunter. So once the bug bash is done, it's important to sit with your product managers or your product owners and triage all the bugs and ensure that the highest the highest priority bugs are fixed. I personally have seen the effectiveness of bug bash, right? In some of the bug bashes, we have found like 50 issues in a single feature, right? So this is a good way to involve the entire team, also to bring in a sense of quality in everyone, right? So I would definitely recommend everyone to conduct 1 or 2 bug bashes in your own organization and see if it adds value, right? You can call for more bug bashes if you see some value. Okay. I want to give you 2-3 quick tips and I will wrap up. So the next topic I want to talk about is sending QA summary reports. So if you send out QA summary reports, you'll increase the transparency by the double fold. So you might have a question that in the age of Agile and DevOps, do we still need QA reports? When you think about it superficially, you might feel that we do not need QA reports, but QA reports add a lot of value, especially in my experience, right? I have seen that QA reports can do wonders. We started sending out QA reports in our organization from past 2-3 months, and I myself have seen the kind of value it has added, right? Our CTO sent us an appreciation note, and he thanked the entire team for sending out standard templates and looping in all the developers and stakeholders. He also said that it's one of the very good things that happened to the company and brought in the transparency that was never there. So what happens is when you have multiple teams and they're working on independent releases, it becomes difficult for the stakeholders to track the releases, to understand what got released, right? Processes we followed, right? Did we do the right kind of testing? So all these answers, what went well in the release and what can be improved, right? So by documenting all this, you'll basically gives you room to improve. And finally, we also add some of the important metrics that can actually give some insight. So Agile talks about valuing working software over comprehensive documentation. But Agile never says that we do not need any documentation. You need not have to send a extensive QA summary report. You can have a leaner version of it, but do send out QA reports. And you can experiment by doing this. You'll definitely see a lot of value by sending out QA reports after the end of the sprint or after the end of the next thing that I want to talk about is writing quality bug reports and standardizing bug reporting. One of the most important traits of a tester is to write a quality bug report. This is the most important trait, and it is often overlooked by testers. Right? If you ask me what is the most important thing that the tester should know, it's writing quality bug reports. It's especially important if you are working remotely also, right? So what is a quality bug report? Quality bug report is the one which is precise and has all the details that is required to replicate, debug, and fix the issue. So if a developer comes to you and asks you more details about the bug, it means that you have not done a good job of writing a bug report. I will tell you why this is important. So let's say if the developer does not understand your bug report, or your bug report does not have enough information, there is a lot of back and forth that happens, right? When this happens, there is a lot of time wasted, and it will eventually result in delayed bug resolutions, right? Uh, it will basically reduce your velocity. And if you have 10 people in your team, let's say I'm the QA lead and I have 10 people in my team, and if 10 people write bug reports in 10 different ways, think about it will be for the developer to analyze 10 different styles of bug reports and actually fix the bug. So this is wherein standardized bug reporting comes in. You need to standardize your bug reporting across your team and your organization so that everybody writes the bugs in the same way. Right? You can have a template based on which everybody writes the bug reports. When you do this, it will also ensure that none of the important details are missed out from the bug report. And I have written more details about creating a standardized bug report in one of my articles. You can go through it. So all I want to say is, as testers, we need to develop this habit of writing quality bug reports and also promote the same within our team. For me, writing quality bug reports is an art, and it can be only mastered with time and experience. So if you are using Sheets for test case management, if you are performing scripted testing, please stop using Sheets for test case management, because Sheets are not meant to write test cases, right? Sheets do not have traceability. You cannot reuse your test cases, nor can you share it easily with everyone, and they often get lost. So if you are doing scripted testing, please use test case management tool, and stop using Sheets for test case management. So I have come to the end of my presentation. So I want to talk about the key takeaways today. Today we learned what is shifting left and how we can prevent bugs by testing early. We talked about continuous testing and how the entire team is involved to achieve continuous testing. Right? Quality is everyone's responsibility, and everyone needs to contribute to achieve continuous testing. We talked about devising an intelligent test automation strategy. We learned what to automate, what not to automate. We learned about test automation pyramid. We also understood what to expect from test automation. We discussed some tips about in-sprint test automation and how to achieve in-sprint test automation. We also discussed about measuring success for test automation using 3 simple metrics. We discussed about scripted testing and exploratory testing. We talked about how mind maps can help you in scripted testing. How mind maps can help you in exploratory testing. We discussed about the quality of the test data and why it really matters. We talked about using production data and using synthetic data. We talked about how bug bashes can help you reduce bugs. We also discussed about creating visual dashboards, standardizing bug reporting, sending QA reports, and test case management. The first thing that I want you to do when you leave here today is to implement some of them in your organizations. right? Please feel free to experiment, use some of the concepts, techniques, you know, tips and tools that we discussed today, and implement in our organizations. I would be really, happy to know and talk to you about your experiences of using these ideas that I mentioned today. And I will look forward to hear from you about using these ideas. So I would really like to thank Quality Assurance Group for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts. I really appreciate their effort to help me connect with you guys. And please feel free to connect with me on any of social media. As I told you earlier, I am really active on social media and I would love to interact with each one of you. And I will definitely try to reply to everyone who gets in touch with me. So with that, I will open up for questions. Let me look at the chat box and see the questions that have been asked. Question I got was, how can I, as a participant, prepare myself to the bug bash meeting? Okay, so for the bug bash, as as a participant, what you can do is you can go through the list of known issues. You can do some pre-preparation of how the feature works, right? You will have some insight about what the feature is all about. So you can do some pre-preparation. You can actually have the build installed in your devices. You have the right kind of devices, right? You can basically do the pre-preparation so that during the 1 hour focused bug bash, you do not try to focus on understanding the product. Right? If you have done some preparation before about learning the product, right, installing the build in your devices, right, try to free up your time and focus on testing. Right? So do some pre-preparation by learning about the product and exploring it just before the session. That will actually help you to be uh, more effective when you're actually a participant in the bug bash. Okay, next question is, recommend. So, I'm not sure if there are any good uh, you know uh, good test case management tool that is free, right? uh, there are few ones which might be outdated. So if you are looking for test case management tools, there are some which are cheaper and can give you return in investment, right? So in our organization, we use a tool called QA Touch. Uh, it's cheap. I think it's around $65 for one subscription, and it does the job, right? So you can look for QA Touch, which is actually cheaper. uh, Traceability, like mind maps. Many of the features are there in QA Touch, and it's relatively cheaper. You can go for QA Touch. Okay, the same question. What is the best tool for scripted testing? So, see, scripted testing is an approach, right? And tools are here only to record your test cases, right? For scripted testing, as an approach, you have to look at it as an approach rather than as a tool, right? So there are n number of test case management tools, right? So I do not want to talk about the test case management tools, but as an approach, you have to think about scripted testing and exploratory testing as an approach. Right? If you want to use test case management tools, right? There are a lot of ones in the market, right? You can try out Zephyr if you want, but Zephyr can be a little expensive. You can look for QA Touch. There are other tools like EasyQA. You can use TestRail. Right? So there are n number of tools available. Only thing is you have to see what's your budget and also compare the features between some of these tools before you actually buy any of these tools. Also feel free to do a POC, right? If you have a 10-member team, one or two people can actually use the tool first, gather the feedback, and then decide if you want to actually work. Okay, so the next question is when we need to conduct the bug bash event. See, you can conduct the bug bash event when you are nearing to release, right? Let's say you have a critical release, so you can involve everyone in bug bash. That way, you are indirectly doing a UAT. Right? You are involving all your developers, your product managers, right? So that way, you are sharing the responsibility of quality, right? So you can have it anytime you need based on your context, or you can have it, let's say, a week before your release or so. That way, you are getting additional support from your entire team. What are those? Okay, let me go back to that slide. Okay, so this one is Selenium. This one is APM, which is for automating your mobile applications. This is Postman. So we personally use Postman for automating. So many people might not know that Postman has automation capabilities as well. And any newbie can actually learn quick automation using Postman and start automating. So this is rest assured. We can also use rest assured for API testing and automation. And of course, unit tests are JUnit and test engine. I hope I answered your question. Okay. Yeah, we are good. Thank you everyone for spending some time with me today, and I hope you enjoyed this webinar. I hope we will meet again in the future in some more webinars. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay home, and happy testing. I'll see you again soon. Thank you and bye.